This is the Regular Dialogue podcast hosted by me, Greg Anderson. You know, social media is great, except when it isn't. Social media has been boiled down to these saltine cracker-sized memes in video. I had this idea of starting a podcast. That is to say, to put the social back into social media, to have conversations with regular people, to simply hear their stories and discuss what is going on in their minds. So the following conversation is with my friend Gabe Seymour. He is a business owner at pestpatrolpdx.com. And in this conversation, we talk about social media, building a business, eschatology, among other things. In the description below, there are timestamps, so feel free to move about the conversation. Now, in the first 20 or so minutes of the conversation, you may hear a baby cry. Now, in my defense, I didn't quite realize how well it would pick up that cry. But it's okay, because after a few minutes, you no longer hear him cry. The baby, not Gabe. And lastly, this episode is brought to you by yours truly. You know, everybody knows about 36 real estate agents, but now you know 37. If you're looking to buy or sell property in the Portland metro area, you can reach out to me at anderson37.com. Now on to the show. I thought a good reason to talk to you is because, well, one, I'm entering a new phase in life. So before this year, when I would post on social media, and by social media I mean like Facebook.
Yeah.
That I would post. So you and I post differently, and I thought this would be a good conversation on Facebook. And I've never asked you explicitly like how much thought you've put into this, but on Facebook, you can choose. Are you gonna post this to the world? Are you gonna post this to friends? And if you ever dig in, there's actually deeper settings. You can do friends of friends, and you can select different audiences.
Yeah.
You've always done the world, at least since I've known you, and you're very declarative in a very, well, and I've always been the exact.
We'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that. Well, we'll talk. I mean, that's, and I've always been the opposite. Like, I only post to friends because I feel like there's a social contract.
Yeah.
With at least Facebook, there's a social contract, and what I mean by that is someone befriends you, and it could be a colleague or a friend, someone in your circle, and but they assume you get so much, and I'm maybe more self-conscious about this than I should be.
Yeah.
Of like, what kind of content do they expect from me? Does that make sense? And I know because on Facebook you can befriend somebody and then you can unfollow them. And you kind of figure out what people are unfollowing you because they never interact with your posts or
which is most of my friends.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing about, and I've noticed, and I don't know if you've noticed, but I've noticed this about you. So I'm curious if you've thought through these issues. But for instance, when it's friends, when you select the friend, not you, but like when someone that I know on Facebook selects the friend selector, they'll get a lot more likes and engagement than you do. You'll do like this declarative, like John the Baptist or Jesus turning over tables, but then you get like one or two people. And I know because I'm a coward, but I'm one of them. Like I don't interact with them because I know that if because I've seen this on my Facebook feed where I'll like something, or I'll see someone else like, Gabe Seymour likes REI, and I hate the fact that they're leveraging what I liked against against all of my friends. They're using me. Yeah. And so I actually went through and I unliked everything except like a couple of small businesses people that I know I know aren't going to buy the ads. Right. Well, you buy ads, but. But one of the things that I like about podcasts, I should step back. One of the reasons I love my favorite social media network is Twitter. And what I love about Twitter and I love about Facebook is I feel like it's very opt-in. It's like, come if you want to come, don't come if you don't want to come. It's clean. Instagram started out that way, and now it's gotten as messy as Facebook and Instagram where, you know what I mean? Like, it's less clean. Like, we can post this video. And like I said, this is new for me because I'm putting this as a public video.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do with that. Like, I'm still like processing through mentally of the issues. But have you thought about that? Have you thought about, did you?
Yeah, I kind of shifted. Well, I don't know exactly what preempted me to switch largely to doing public on my Facebook feed. But it was at some point like last year, I think. Do you want me to silence the baby?
What does that mean? Closing the door?
Just getting him taken care of.
You just close the door. It's up to you.
Well, he's down here. The door is closed.
Oh, it is. It's up to you. It's up to you.
I'm fine.
I'm fine pushing through too. He's not being too disruptive.
Yeah, he'll go down.
Okay.
So I don't. I think I had a thought through reason for it back when I did it, but I don't know if I don't know if there's a whole lot of difference right now between me posting publicly and privately, because I'm not like a celebrity, So not.
Well, you might be famous, but you're infamous. Like I saw that you posted on like the Moscow, Idaho City Council board or something. You're like, how dare you? How dare you? And Gabe from Portland, Oregon. Like, here's where to find me. Here's where to look me up.
I think an aspect of it was wanting to be just sort of intentional, like just being real about who you are,
Yeah.
And I think it's very easy to like live sort of two lives. You can live kind of a nice, clean life on social media, and then but then you're like, oh, but I'm also like a Christian, and like the world really hates that.
Yeah.
The difficult thing that I found that we've talked about before is, especially with social media and written postings, is that it's really hard for people to hear your heart and your voice in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like this type of thing is so much better.
Yeah, in fact, I've thought a lot about that, only because. So I thought of an analogy, which is, imagine if you and your wife are fighting. Like, I have a rule that we don't fight over text. Right? It's like, you don't start being like, wow, you should have, like we just, if you have an argument, if you have a beef, like we don't deal with it over text.
Yeah, good idea.
And my wife's an introvert, and I'm an extrovert, and it's easier for her to just, she just wants, the whole world through text. But I think that's a perfect analogy of what social media is.
You're sitting in the same house, texting each other.
Yeah, no, yeah. Or like as soon as you leave to go to work, she's, no.
Yeah.
But here's an analogy. When these social media networks were invented, 20 years ago, they did the best that they could with the technology that they had. So what did they have? They had text and photos.
Right.
And that was good. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't have done what they did, but they did the best that they could. And this is why I'm fascinated with this medium, because when you have these conversations on, like when you say, this is true, or, something else is false. Mm-hmm. And then either people will like that comment, or they'll digress, or they'll dissent, and then you can't. It's very difficult to have a constructive conversation,
mm-hmm.
right? But because we're not, it's just through text.
Yeah.
It's not like, and TikTok is interesting, but like they kind of popularize this 10-second,
mm-hmm.
But it's mostly not really for. It's like for little sound bites. If like someone says something really witty, you can clip it. Like on someone like Dave Ramsey says, they can there's this little inspirational thing. But it's very difficult for what we have this problem of. Culturally, we're going through this shift, and you can't make any headway.
Yep.
Right? Where my wife reminded me of this text in the New Testament where Paul said, I think it was Paul, he said, I am meek among you, but I'm bold in writing. What has that say? You know that verse?
Mm-hmm.
I'm botching the quote,
mm-hmm.
but it's It's this idea that, and you're kind of like that, where you're pretty amicable, you're a pretty nice guy. I don't really see you getting angry.
Yeah.
But you never would have tell that by looking at your social media posts.
Yeah. Right.
You're very bold in your demeanor.
And I think that's why you really. It is helpful to have a blend of media content types, and it's like ideally somebody shouldn't walk away thinking something completely wrong about you if they're reading your posts.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something that I'm walking through and learning how to do better. But yeah, it's tough. I just had something recently, and ended up having an interaction on Facebook. I posted something about the Canadian pastors that got arrested, and ended up getting into it, and then I later apologized to the person I was getting into it over. But it's like, but that's still on Facebook. I'm like, I'm not going to go and delete that necessarily. Although I thought about it.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you? But like I apologized. I was like, man, I was way too aggressive. Like I love you. We're friends. Like, I'm not going to,
Yeah, that's another thing that I've been thinking about, too, which is the permanence of social media. So, like, if we were doing this live, like, let's say that we were having this conversation. Let's say that we had 5 people here. We have 5 people here. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting is, like, right now we have 0 people watching because it's not live.
Right.
And then maybe 1, then 2. But it could go to 1 million. It could go to, like, it could go viral,
right.
or, it's possible.
Once they find out that you're talking to me.
Yeah, I know, yeah. And I thought about, like, in my mind, and I'm still working this out, but, like, there's 2 types of content. One is time sensitive, and the other is timeless. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, time sensitive, if we're talking about, like, did you hear what Kate Brown did last week? Can you believe it? Mm-hmm. It doesn't age very well.
Right.
And 6 months from now.
Yeah. You're trying to leverage something.
And so I think it's not a bad idea to say, let it be live for a month, so anyone who misses it can catch it if they want to. It's kind of like some churches have done that. I've noticed. Well, they'll have the last sermon up, but they don't have them up forever because they're not timeless. Mm-hmm. I mean, not some of them are timeless, but some of them are. Mm-hmm. Versus if you're recording like someone's testimony. And that's where it kind of diverges, where something can be timeless.
Right.
If you're sharing an experience with someone going through a miscarriage, or having a Down syndrome baby, or something like that, that's a really powerful narrative.
Yeah.
That's timeless, and that should go on forever. But I don't think
Yeah.
even this conversation might not age well.
Right. Yeah.
So I think I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, and that's the interesting thing about our culture is our culture doesn't forget, right? So there was that verse, love keeps no records of wrongs, right? So if you forgive someone, you shouldn't be able to dig up the old past, So I think that post it's wrong that you can't delete that post, that you feel like it would be dishonest for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the fact that you feel like it would be dishonest to delete that post shows that the social contract is.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's like a dishonest thing or just like a. I don't. Maybe,
well, no, you're right to think that.
Maybe I'm just going to go delete it after.
No, you're right to think. You're right to think. You're right to think about that. You're right to hesitate. I think that's right.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I don't want to look like I'm being elusive and erasing the past.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So you're right to do that. What I'm saying is, it's wrong that this platform has been built in such a way that you feel that you can't.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and then you have cancel culture that, which we could do another 10 podcasts on. That, like, they will literally dig up the past.
Exactly.
So you could say something 15 years ago, and
it's great about cancel culture because it's selective too.
Oh yeah.
Like Jimmy Fallon, if he was a conservative, if he came out as a conservative, they'd cancel him like that. He did blackface sketches, like all the things that the left have canceled the right over. Mm-hmm. He's done, and he even did an apology video. But he's like on their side, so they haven't canceled him.
Not yet.
But he's beholden to them, so he can't. If he came out as a Christian tomorrow, he'd be gone like that because,
Yeah, he'll get canceled.
If he loses, which I don't know if he ever will. But that's that's my point. Is
Yeah.
it's completely hypocritical.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting because, well, I could go on and on, but it's interesting because I don't know if Facebook will go on forever. I feel like we're all using it because it's the most.
Yeah.
It's the least blunt tool, and all the tools are blunt. Well, I still think like. Well, I think YouTube is my favorite. It's amazing.
YouTube's great.
But obviously and what's interesting, they haven't been as trigger happy on censoring as they could be.
Yeah.
They'll like demonetize, but they don't.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, they've done their fair share, but
they have.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like Steven Crowder. Have you seen that? They're coming after him hard, and he's suing them.
Oh, good.
Yeah. But it's something that that I've had to think a lot about because I've been kind of which is interesting because I'm an extrovert, but I'm an introvert on social media, or I have been as of before today. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with the system. If I,
Yeah.
To your point about cancel culture, I was listening to this podcast I listened to called Bigger Pockets. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've heard of it, but they do they're about building money through real estate. But it's funny because the guy who leads the podcast, he's this tall guy, he's 6'4", and he's a Christian. He's not shy about being a Christian, but he's going through these you should do these things. He said, and you should pray or meditate if you're not a Christian. He makes this he says, you should pray or meditate if you're not. He makes this allowance or this concession.
That's right.
And one of the things I think has been good about the last year is it's let's just dispense with this.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that people who don't pray or irreligious shouldn't listen to you, and I would hope that they do.
Yeah.
But this kind of bending over backwards to try and please them is it's kind of a you're not being true to yourself, first of all.
Yeah. And you're not treating the other you're not actually treating the other people like adults. Real people recognize that if you're a Christian and you say hey, it's really important that you pray, whatever, for this, that there's a whole swath of culture that thinks that you're stupid,
right.
And that's okay. They can do that.
Yeah.
They can think that, and you can just let them think that without, or meditate or pray to whatever God you believe. It's you just don't have to pander like that.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about cancel culture, and I know we've talked about this off the video, but it's something that I've thought a lot about, which is every single time that someone gets canceled, you radicalize them. Mm-hmm. Because there's no reason. It's like these doctors in Southern Oregon, in Medford, who spoke out. I can't remember what they spoke out against, but they spoke out, these two doctors, and they just got, pulled their license.
Right.
And, that's insane.
Yep.
And what do they just do? They just radicalize them. Because you now took... I heard this great analogy in Africa, and I forget, I'm hearing this third hand, but I thought it was a great analogy, and I'm going to butcher it anyway. But it's in some impoverished country in Africa, the military hired a militia, but they didn't pay them. And so there are these young people, these young kids with guns that they paid them to be there to do their bidding, but they wouldn't pay them. And so they would go.
They said they would pay him, and they didn't.
Well, yeah, and they would go and do, or they would go do what they, and then they'd go do half the work, and then they get paid, and then they do the other half, and they wouldn't get paid. And so that let's say they go into a village to collect taxes, and then they go turn around and go steal food from the village,
right?
And do and they have a saying there in Africa, which is that hungry bellies don't listen.
Yeah.
Which is something that I've thought a lot about in our culture, which is why it seems like in the last 18 months, with everything that's happened, there's been such a passive response. And maybe you don't think that, maybe you don't think of Antifa as being especially passive, but there's been a lot of things that's been happening that a lot of the left and the right have been more passive than I thought they would be.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why is because hungry bellies aren't hungry yet. In other words, when you can't get milk, when you can't get or you're starting to see this, and I'm curious if these things will unravel further or if it will resolve.
Yeah.
But like you're starting to see like, they're saying that we might have gas shortage. In other words, if it doesn't really start hurting.
Yeah.
If you're just paying 20% more on milk, or I guess paying 4 times as much for lumber is getting pretty expensive. But it's not. It's just annoying.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to break into a store to eat because a gallon of milk is $400.
Yeah.
It's not. We're not there yet.
And the question is, because other countries have gotten there, particularly other socialist, communist countries have gotten there. And so, like, by the time it gets there, do you have any freedoms left? Right? Like, can you even push back at that point?
Yeah.
Have you just given everything? Have you just worn the mask for so long that now they have your guns and your free speech and your right to assemble? And
that is the question. That's a good question. I don't know.
That's why we should protect them and fight culturally now before, while we still have those left.
Well, it's like the frog and the water analogy.
Yeah, that's right.
Although, but it's not this last couple years hasn't felt like that. Like it's been very rapid.
Yeah.
And if anything, it was giving people pause.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems like more people are I think, sort of getting red-pilled, like recognizing what's going on, and sort of waking up from the passivity.
But are they though?
Well, I wouldn't say at large.
So here's an example. Like Kate Brown said recently that you don't have to wear a mask if you go to a business now if you've been fully vaccinated. You have to prove you've been fully vaccinated. Did you see this? And part of me is like really angry, and part of me is just like, just
Yep.
It's not quite like, it's not like taking your guns, but it's not nothing either.
Yeah, and then it's just Kelly and I were just talking about this earlier, that like you get put in this weird conundrum where they've put in place a crazy phony set of laws, and then they like pull away said phony laws, and then they put in more laws.
Yeah.
and you're like, well, so do I go into a grocery store when like they're sort of just assuming that I'm vaccinated? Yeah. Like, do you just go in, or is that like lying? Well, they're like, no, the whole thing is like all just a facade. So.
Yeah, it's because I listened to that audiobook that you guys recommended, Live Not by Lies.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, no, I shouldn't lie. Because I shouldn't go in with the pretenses that I've been vaccinated.
That's right. Yeah.
Like that's wrong. That's being dishonest and being. One of the things that I thought Jordan Peterson made a great point when he was talking about. He was quoting from the Gulag Archipelago, one of those where like this guy saw the Russian. You saw tyranny come on, and he said it was every small lie. It was a billion small lies that we lied to ourselves. We just doing exactly that. We're
That's
just.
Right.
It's like saying, no, it's not honest.
That's right. But you're free at the same time. Like, you're free to walk into a store that says you can only come in here without a mask if you've been vaccinated.
Right.
Because they the whole thing is a facade.
Ridiculous. Yeah,
it's literally is built on lies. You're free to go and be a normal human being. Like you don't have to wear a mask. You don't have to get vaccinated. You can walk around and be normal. A free American if you want to.
Yeah.
And it would be nice. I'd love to see eventually businesses also stop lying, stop playing into it, and just say, like, no, I'm not gonna do that.
What I think is like all these businesses. Who are the people who are enforced? Who is the burden that the government is putting on these businesses? Mm-hmm. It's the minimum wage. It's the lowest paid. It's the Walmart greeter. It's the Costco greeter. And you're like, they have to be the one
Yeah.
to be like, it's not fair of you to make them, I could see like making
to make them do your dirty work.
Yeah, I could see like a cop, like putting cops, that would be very tyrannical, but you're telling
Yeah.
So one thing I want to, talk, going back to cancel culture, and I think this is important to circle back to. I'm part of this network where they one of the biggest things that a real estate agent does is they network.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, hey, I need a contractor. Hey, I need a plumber.
Yeah.
And so I'm on this Facebook group, and this person says, do you know of a good painter who's LGBTQ or is TUV? And I'm like,
plus.
Yeah, plus TUV. And I'm like, and part of me is like, I want to put on.
You just got demonetized.
You can't. Yeah. But like, what I'm saying is, well, two things. One, I think they have the right to do that. First of all.
Yes, that's right.
I think yeah. If you're left leaning, and you want to hire another left leaning painter, now I think there actually are laws against discrimination.
Yes.
That was my point. Is like they're literally breaking the law.
Yes.
That's like that, and that's what they're doing right now in downtown Portland. They're saying
yes.
Google Maps is doing this, where it says black-led business.
Yep.
Or women-led business. Yeah, women-owned.
Yep.
It's like,
it's okay to break the law when it goes with the narrative.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know how you solve that, except that, well, I do know one way you solve that, which I heard this funny thing that on those, those forms you have to fill out where you have to put your race, and it says, black, Asian, it says NA, or not, I don't want to decline the answer. I heard like 99% is whites that answered NA.
Really?
Because it's like, this game that you're playing, and I'm just like, I opt out of the game. I
put black.
Yeah.
And that's how I got to college.
I knew someone who put, I think, Eastern European, or the Western European Islander, which is white.
Yes, the big islands. Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I thought about doing this podcast, which is, okay, if the biggest reason that, I'll start over. What is the biggest contribution I have to the market? It's just networking. Right? I mean, that's what a realtor is supposed to do. Even if you're not buying or selling, realtors have a reputation of being good at hey, so-and-so, so-and-so.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's interesting that I would be in this position now because if they're doing that, which is, people are saying, I want somebody who's left-leaning who's a painter.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to say because I don't want to say I want to hire a painter. I want to make sure he's right-leaning.
Yeah.
But it's kind of come to that.
Yeah.
It's kind of come to that because they fired first.
Well, and this could be a total rabbit hole here, but I think it's worth noting that the government has no right to tell you that you can't discriminate in your buying and selling, because a free market will automatically regulate that, and you're going to get just kicked to the curb if you're a total jerk. And if you said, I'm only going to buy from LGBTQ businesses, right, or I'm only going to sell to LGBTQ people, well, guess what? That gives you 2% of the market. So go for it. Good luck.
Well, I think you misunderstand it. I think that you're getting more than 2%. Because it's the people who are being complacent. It's not just those people. It's people who are, maybe I misspoke.
Yeah.
That they're LGBTQ affirming.
Right, yeah.
So that's more than 50% because they're just going with the herd.
Yeah.
And what they're saying, what they're implicitly saying is we're saying we don't want these people who are not aligning with our values.
Yeah, sure. And that will give you more of a broad swath. But even then, it's like they have every right to do that, and that's fine. In my opinion, and I think, edit this out. No, I think that you should, if you're a total racist, you should be able to bring that terrible racism into your business and let it destroy your business.
But you're arguing for creative destruction. You're saying that let them be fools, and his folly will cause his business to fail.
That's right. Yeah. The government. I mean, like, I don't see it as their job to regulate those sorts of issues. I think the market will necessarily regulate it.
Right.
You know.
Well, yeah. I don't know, but they're trying. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but But to continue down the path you were going on, if they're doing that, as Christians or conservatives, does that factor into how you create your network? And I think absolutely, yeah.
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 Well, what I mean is, and maybe I should frame what I'm saying. In the same way that, in a great movie, you have the hero at the beginning of the movie who's not a hero yet, and he's like flabby and out of shape.
Right.
And then something happens, some crisis comes that causes him to grow up really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And then whether it's a sports movie, he starts working out, or if it's like Frodo, he starts plowing through But there's something that so. I want to say that where we've been complacent, but I would say it's not necessarily our fault per se. Maybe it might be, but it's so. For instance, before 2021, if you wanted to find a plumber, you would just go and Google a plumber,
mm-hmm.
and you would go and see, okay, what has 4.7 stars on Google reviews,
right?
Oh, good. Okay, they complained about this, but that. Okay. All right, I'll go with him.
Yeah. And
now it's become really back to what it was before even the phone. Maybe even the phone book exists, because the phone book became the internet in the beta form, where it's like,
right.
Who paid? All right, who's the plumber?
Right.
Before the phone book, it was just like, you know any plumbers?
Yeah.
And now it's the irony is it's come full circle.
Yeah. Right.
It's like, hey, do you know any good plumbers? Hey, do you know any good, pest patrol people?
Yeah.
It becomes network first.
Yeah.
Versus just like, we become complacent where we just relied upon.
I think that, and then, like, those same avenues, the online phone books, the Googles, sort of becoming that, but they're starting to filter in different things. Like, are they LGBTQ friendly? Like, those sorts of, maybe like, cultural or interpersonal types of.
So are you still spending money on Google ads?
Yeah.
Oh.
Unfortunately.
Well, why don't you just cut yourself off? Just.
Yeah, will do.
Well, I mean, so I was talking to Julia about this. Like, I know your business might not be one right now to like, because it's niche enough. Like, it's not like everyone. If you pulled everyone that we know in our circles, there's not enough people that want to murder rodents that can't do it themselves.
That's right.
So you have to cast a wider net.
Yes,
I get that.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe someone like me. But I was talking to a friend who he's a contractor. He's never paid for an ad.
Yeah.
100% what he's done is just 100% what he's done is word of mouth.
Yep.
And he's done well. He's done really well.
Yeah, totally.
And I like the verse in Proverbs that says, "You see a man skilled in his work, he will stand before kings. He will
That's
not."
Right.
So he takes his craft very seriously. Like he's complete ADHD, obsessive compulsive, and it shows, right? And that's where he gets these really high end clients from Lake Oswego.
Yeah, right.
Because he does that. He cares.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you cut yourself off, well, I don't know how much percentage
of my business comes from ads.
Well, what I mean is, if you took the percentage you spend on ads divided by your gross income.
Oh, it's huge because the business is so new. I mean, it's like we're talking about 30 30%, 40% of my sales, basically.
Yeah.
I'm paying back into it's. I mean, it's just it's astronomical.
Right.
But it's very intentional. Trying to grow it really quickly.
Yeah.
You could definitely do it a lot more subdued and a lot more organic, and it would be slower, and that's fine. That's a good way to do it. But I am. That's kind of this next season of the business for us is going into networking more and networking with property management companies, real estate agents, and that sort of thing, to be able to get more of that just word of mouth, reoccurring type of stuff. But yeah, it's so new right now that.
Yeah, and it's not. You don't have enough. Your circle isn't big enough to.
Yeah, and we're in the process of start the rock rolling and get some momentum. We're paying a lot of money to get momentum. Once you get the momentum, then it's all great, and you can when you have 5,000 customers in your client book, then you can just send out an email campaign or remarket to them, right?
Yeah.
But until then, it's spendy. The joys of a brand new business.
You're not saying you enjoy them as much as you I've heard that, like, I'm curious if you could tell me if this is true or not, that 80% of small business entrepreneurs, people who start small businesses, would say, if I knew how much work it would be, I would have just done something else.
I'm still trying to convince myself that I'm not in that 80%. No, it's so much work, but it's such a joy. It's so fun.
Yeah, and something I've thought about, I heard this this quote on the podcast recently, but after World War II, they had GI Bill. Mm-hmm. So this is not every citizen, but among those who were veterans, so the ones who actually got discharged honorably, 51% became small business owners.
Wow.
51%.
That's amazing.
So you could say the
huge.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in again, to credit to them, like, they just won a war. It's like you look at the barriers to entry to start a business, and they're large. Like, I've read lots of entrepreneur books of small people who started businesses, and it's like failure. It's like you have to fail a lot.
Yep.
And when the great thing about if you just fought a war where you're killing Hitler, it's like, well, I cheated death. I saw my friends die. We're like, you nothing else is unattainable at that point. You're like, oh, who cares if I go bankrupt? I didn't die in Germany.
Yeah.
So you're like, let's do it. So the friction is a lot lower because you just and we're us millennials, we haven't had that kind of moment of clarity.
Right.
And I heard, like, it's hard, right? There's a great book I just finished, Phil Knight's book. Have you read it?
My wife read it, and we talked about
Shoe Dog. Yeah, Shoe Dog. It was.
I was thinking about it when you were saying that.
It was such a good book. I'd highly recommend. I listened to it, so it didn't. I just listened to it on car rides. Mm-hmm. It's such a great story because I think Dave Ramsey tells this story, and he says, what they say about me is I was an overnight success. He doesn't see the 20 years of toil, of like the stress of bearing. It's like failure, like blood, sweat, tears for 20 years. Yep. And then finally it gets enough momentum to go parabolic, and it's like, oh, you're an overnight success. He's like, are you kidding me?
Yep.
And I feel like it's all these stories. Like, I think that's true of Facebook and Google and Apple. It was true of Apple. I read his biography.
Yeah.
It's true of Phil. It's like, it's hell.
Mm-hmm.
It's hell.
Yep.
And the cool thing is for us, because there are so many millennials who are not willing to put up the pain, and it is pain, and it's
yeah.
There's great reward because you're not competing with 51% like the vets in after World War II competing with.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
It's like, it's wide open.
Yeah.
If you can get, I mean, if you're willing to,
And you just have to be patient. It's like you look at the CEOs, not of like the cool companies, but like most of just the run-of-the-mill companies that are still doing tens and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars in revenue.
Yeah.
Like these CEOs, they're old.
Yeah.
They're 50, 60, like they've been in the game for a long time. So you shouldn't just expect to be able to go out and be an overnight success. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And I know I heard a little bit of Chris's story of the same thing. He tried a lot. Your father-in-law, Chris, he's got to try a lot of things.
Yeah.
To fail a lot of things. And it's, I think, especially for millennials, and I know that, and maybe it's because, going back to social media, because it's so apparent, your failures are like transparent to everyone. It's like, oh, so that thing failed, huh? That sucks.
Hey, saw your LinkedIn status.
Right, yeah. And it's like, you have to live with your emotions on your sleeve now.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's way more on the line than it was for those vets back in after World War II.
Yeah. Yeah, and I found like, I try and post regularly, but I don't do very well. But the infrequently that I post about my business, and I'll get people texting or calling her when I'm interacting. Oh, cool. So how's it going? Looks like everything's going great. You're like, yeah, it's steady and just a ton of work. It looks so much more glamorous. Like any sort of growth looks really glamorous, and you just don't see the hours that get put in behind the scene, and the anxiety and the hard decisions and the money you're putting. It's like, forget about being successful, just surviving.
Right, just balancing the books.
Yeah, just not dying.
Yeah, it's a lot of not dying.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that life though? I mean, before civilization really came to its own, like before maybe the Industrial Revolution, like that was life. What I mean is, like, life was, it was. You
better take that back about civilization.
Why is that?
Civilization came to its own prior to the Industrial Revolution.
Okay, maybe I misspoke. What I mean is,
we'll cut it.
Cut it. No, we won't cut it.
Roll the tape.
Yeah. Modern civilization, or what I mean is, life was very difficult until very recently.
Yes.
What I mean is, you wouldn't name your child until they turned 2, because infant mortality was so high. You were just like, well, there's just another one going to die, so why get emotionally attached to it? It's horrible.
You can't look up name lists on Google anyways, so it's hard,
But also, like, in the first century, like in Jesus' time, men didn't live, the average lifespan for men was like 35, because they lived very hard lives. Because they just they died in an accident, they drowned, or like it was a very hard life, and we're spoiled.
Yes.
Because life is way more sterile.
Yeah.
Even for us, where the hardest things for us is like taxes, and being bankrupt. It's like, so you go bankrupt.
Yeah, it's a rough life.
Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Trying to explain bankruptcy to a first century person.
He's like, so it just all goes away?
Like, no, you can keep your house.
And nobody kills you?
You can keep your house. They might take your car.
He's like, you have a house?
Wait, you have indoor plumbing?
Yeah. Yeah, we've sort of lost, I think, also as a culture, especially men, like an understanding of God's design that we conquer, that we have dominion, that we be strong and aggressive and be out in the world winning things,
Winning, yeah. Yeah. Well, winning things is interesting because it's not, I think this is important to say, it's not right now our culture believes that it's winner take all. Like, for you to get something means I don't get something.
Yeah.
But that's not true.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like you're competing, and it is true. Like, if you're high, like, okay, so me, if I work hard, I might take a client from Tim.
Yeah.
Right. So in that sense that there is a winner take, because there's only so many people who are buying and selling property.
Yeah.
That's true.
But he's got a Mazda Miata.
And,
Oh, no.
yeah. But that doesn't always, like, before Facebook, like, there was no competition. Like, when Mark Zuckerberg created Facebook, there was just nothing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
He created something out of nothing. And Brett, in theory, brought value to the whole world.
That's right. That's right.
And possibly cursed the whole world.
Yeah.
Interfered with election.
Yeah, and I was more, I guess, I was sort of meaning it in that winning versus losing.
It's the analogy of the caveman, of like, you got to kill something and bring it back to the cave.
That's right.
And if you don't, which
is
a bad analogy, because that is a
but somewhat of a reality. Just like if there's 10 accounts that I can go and get, and the difference is me getting all those accounts and providing for my family, and somebody else not getting them and deciding to go into a different line of work, like, I'm going to go and try and win as many of those accounts as I can, not because I hate the other person,
right?
But because if I can actually win those, then I'm serving the market better, like I'm adding more value into the market. I'm actually helping him in a sense, and it's not in like a cutthroat, like everything on the line and you're just a jerk to people. So yeah, but I mostly just meant it in like that men have lost a sense of sort of competition and aggression and initiative, taking initiative, going out and conquering things.
And it's funny because they understand it intuitively with video games. Like, you get that, like, video games, it is that you are fighting to the death with other video games. Like, there's only one winner.
That's right.
And it's like pursuing of women. Like, there's only so many women. Like, you get this woman and she's now off the market. Like, that's true of some things.
Yes.
And that most certainly is true. Like, if there's another person out there who's also trapping moles, who's in the Portland area, that you are,
Mm-hmm.
but you're also making him better.
That's right. Yeah, because part of my worldview is like that I'm coming into that assuming that, like, no, I'm operating with more honesty, with more integrity, and that's going to actually do something, like, out in the world. It's going to actually change things, and people are going to be drawn to that. And so I want more customers in my business because I'm operating with more integrity,
And if you were just to go work at Valvoline, like, you're just an employee at Valvoline, and maybe you're a well-paid employee at Valvoline, you're up there in the totem pole, but now you've been able to hire Sam and hire Adam. Yeah, like, that's cool. You just created, how much GDP did you just create?
Yeah, it's
out
so
of thin
cool.
air.
Oh, it's amazing.
And that those are jobs that you could have added jobs to Valvoline,
right?
But you did add jobs to your business.
Yeah,
like that's pretty cool.
Well, you said it already, but the creative impetus and the value that is literally created, it's brought into the market. It's almost like ex nihilo. It's like how God spoke the world into create. It's almost like that type of creative force when you go out and you create something new. And Zuckerberg created Facebook, or Apple created the iPhone, and it was like the world didn't know that it needed, or that it wanted, or that it was going to, everyone was going to have this thing, and then you create like this multi-billion-dollar industry. It's amazing. Yeah. And that's what if you look through most of the wealth in each country, including America, all through the world, it's because of the creativity and risk-taking, which is a form of love, from entrepreneurs. It's amazing. Because we all assume, supply and demand assumes that the pie is this big, and so I get this much and you get this much, but it actually is ever growing through human creativity.
Well, I think there are problems, and I think I'll make a bold statement. I think the left some people on the left understand something more than people on the right, which is that, I'll take China for example. And maybe they don't get it, but I think intuitively, like, they've gotten it at some point, and maybe they've lost it. But it's, well, I don't want to pick berries. It's too much work.
Pick berries.
Okay. Like blackberries.
Yeah.
Or apples. So I'll hire a migrant to do it, and the migrant is like, cool. I'll pick apples.
Yeah.
Great. And then you're like, well, we want cheap iPhones. Well, the thing is, if to hire an American, let's pretend that there's not minimum wage.
Yeah.
Because I know there's minimum wage. Let's pretend that you could pay someone, but in order for someone to live in Oregon or even Texas, take a place that's cheap to live.
Mm-hmm.
We have made we as a society have made a grievous error by moving everything, outsource everything and that we've done great damage to our and I think we're starting to realize this. It's like when COVID happened, all the borders shut down.
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh, we can't get things.
Yeah.
Like one of the reasons lumber is so expensive, most of it's made in Canada.
Yeah.
It floats down the river.
Yep.
And then they can't bring it to us because the border's shut down. And so because we were too lazy, or for whatever political reason, because we demanded cheaper iPhones or whatever it was, we demanded cheaper things. That we've shot ourselves not in the foot but in the face, and we're starting to see that.
Yeah, and an element of that at least is the government's role in regulating minimum wage as even an idea. You brought minimum wage in as it's sort of this assumption, But minimum wage, first off, hasn't existed for most of American history, let alone the world's history. A federalized standard that you have to pay them this much or else. And having that it puts a lot of unnecessary burden on a company and sort of pushes them to go, like, there are people, that gets into all the inflation and stuff, but there are people that would be willing to work for $7 an hour, right? Maybe not right now. They may not be able to survive here in Portland because of inflation and stuff, which also it's largely due to the government. But theoretically, there's some people out there.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, not right now because the government's paying them to sit on their couch.
Well, no. So this is really interesting. I don't know if you noticed this. So I read this in an article, and then I went into Walmart. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's true. In Walmart, at least the Walmart closest to me, it's all self-checkout. There's like one not self-checkout.
Yeah.
Maybe. It's all these little kiosks that you go through this thing, and it breaks out to like 12 to 14 self-checkout little things.
Yes.
And there's one employee to like hover.
Yeah.
And they said they did that in direct response to COVID. Because they can't, when the government's paying them to stay at home, and it's the same thing with McDonald's. You go to McDonald's now.
That's right.
And I saw them first, before COVID, I saw them at the airport, these little touchscreens.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, they had like the cashiers, and they're like, well, you can use a touchscreen.
Yeah. And
now it's just touchscreens. Because they can't, so the irony is, whenever I don't know if you can turn off. I feel like paying people to stay at home, it's a difficult thing to turn off. And I don't know if it can be solved until the left leaves the office, until whoever,
Yeah.
Because it's like an unwinnable, but whenever it opens, another analogy is McDonald's. It costs $400,000 for one of these devices, and all it does is flip burgers. That's all it does. It just
Right.
$400,000.
Yeah.
And this is before COVID, when California upped their minimum wage to 14 or 13, whatever it was.
Right.
Like, we'll buy 4 of them.
Right.
$400,000 each for their stores.
Yep.
So and it's like those jobs aren't coming back.
No. And that's the equivalent of outsourcing it to China. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's just a cost-cutting measure.
Yeah.
I think about when my grandpa's 99. He's going to be 100 next month, and he worked at a service station back when he was like a young man.
Yeah.
And you would have kids that would work out at the service station after school and stuff, and they get paid just pennies.
Yeah, pennies.
Literally pennies.
But they're getting work ethic.
It was great.
Yeah.
And it was like, it gave them spending money.
Yeah.
It gave them something to do. And it actually blessed the service station. People would get there. You think of like Chevron and Texaco and stuff, they were these like full service.
Yeah.
They used to be these full
Well,
service
cars
stations.
broke down a lot more. Now cars, you needed to top off the oil because they were leaking oil over the road.
Yeah, that's right. But it was still really nice, you
yeah.
know. And they'd check your tires, they'd wash your windows. It's like, that's great. And we've lost that, and now you have. It's like, oh, you pump your own gas, or if you're here in Oregon, you don't. But
I feel like enough people have talked about that. What I think is really interesting, and I heard this, someone talking about what people did in the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think one thing that I think a lot about, which is whatever this era is, the era starting in March of 2020, whatever this era is, like whenever this era kind of comes to an end, I don't, but like, will we see a Great Depression 2.0? Worse than the Great Depression, equal to, or maybe less so?
Mm.
But one of the things that they did is if you lost your job, you'd going back to network, they'd find somebody who had a farm,
mm-hmm.
and they'd move to the farm and say, hey, look, you have a farm. All I want is food and shelter. The only thing I can give you is myself.
That's right.
So like, I'll help pull weeds, I'll help shovel manure, whatever I need to do. I just need to not die.
Is that indentured servitude?
I mean, but what I'm saying is, like, it was community that
totally
held them.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing.
And it held them, and it's something that I would like to see. I love land. I would love to see like a return to that kind of communal thing that is not a cult. It's not not a, but it's how they survived, and it did really well. Because now these people can live in community, they can hold each other together, they can hold each other up, rather.
Yes. And when it becomes so minimalistic, like, your goal now is just survival. Get enough food on the table for everybody, make sure nobody is out in the cold. It starts, you're really able to do that more easily than if it's like, it would be nice if we all had big screen TVs and a $1,600 a week unemployment check.
Well, okay. Well,
don't jump into the TVs.
Well, I was gonna say, and I think that we as a culture could learn this. And
Can I just pause you?
Sure.
Do you want me to turn the fire off? Are you getting hot?
I am getting a little hot. Yeah.
I was like.
Yeah, I know. It was nice having. I almost.
Oh yeah, we could open it.
It reminds me in Texas. The thing to do in Texas when I was living there was to turn the AC on full blast in the middle of summer, and roll the windows down. Yeah. It's like so inefficient. It's the dumbest thing in the world because you have this cold air right here, this hot air, like.
Oh, and it feels so good. Yeah, totally.
That's what I feel like. I would turn on the fireplace and open the windows.
That's what we do during the winter. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. But sorry, what were you saying?
Well, there's two things I want to say from that conversation. One, we can have nice things if we share them. Here's what I mean. Like Julia, she was looking at this. One of the things that she's really into is freeze-dried food.
Mm-hmm.
But one of these things that freeze-dries food costs like an ungodly amount of money. I mean, I don't know if it was like $600 or something, and all it does is freeze-dry food.
Right.
And it's like, that would be stupid for us to buy that. Even if I make, really good money, it just would be unwise.
Yeah.
But like, we could buy it for the community and we could share it, and like,
rent it out.
Kelly needs to borrow it, and then and then Larissa, and like.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. And like, why don't we? There's no reason we don't do that. And like, okay, so we have the, maybe we have the freeze dryer and you have this and we just, it's a co-op of sharing things.
Yeah.
And it gets back into the story of Acts where they all had things in need. And I think one of the biggest obstacles for us as American Christians is we still want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to have own these nice things versus sharing them.
Mm-hmm.
But if we share them, we can have a lot nicer things. And it made me think of that, of like the TV, of like, if you have, 30 30 people. Let's say you literally like this like the Great Depression 2.0. Like things are rough. Like you have a pole barn and like 50 people are living in there because it's just it's rough. You can afford a 82-inch TV,
right?
And you can watch movies. It's like what I mean. Like it doesn't become. But if it's you go to most homes in America, like in Lake Oswego, it's like
82-inch TV. Wow.
I'm just saying. But I'm saying you have 2.1 people living in these homes in Lake Oswego.
That's right.
So they have two adults and maybe one kid, maybe one pet.
Sometimes
and they have
1.2 people.
They have 82. What I'm saying is that it makes it. You can have nice things.
One in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's bigger than But I'm saying you can have nice things if you share them, and then it lifts the burden, and you can say you can have nice things.
Yeah.
As long as you share them. And one of the things, and I know that you still hold to. I knew I'd find some way to bring this topic up. Are you still a post-millennial?
Yes.
And wrong?
That's right. Post-millennial.
So one thing that I will commend to you, I do listen to people who I disagree with.
Yeah.
And I think you should too.
Yeah.
And I also think it's good to be, to do these thought experiments.
Yeah.
But if you read in Revelation, of course, if anyone who didn't have the mark of the beast, they couldn't buy or sell. And I know, we could go crypto. We could go a lot of different places with this topic.
Gosh, leave crypto out of this. It's had a rough month.
No, I'm bringing it up. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that this thought experiment and I think it's very plausible. At least from my perspective, that is a future that if I don't see, that my kids can see. If my kids don't see, then their kids will see.
That something will restrict buying and selling.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, this is what kind of brings back to networking. If you don't, this is great. Dave Ramsey goes on this rant about he hates gold. And I thought he made an interesting point, which is, and he hates crypto for the same reason, which is, if you look at history, when economies fail, they don't trade bars of gold. They trade goods and services.
Right.
So they say, hey, Gabe, I don't have any money, but I have these wraps to be trapped in my house. I'll give you a bag of flour.
Right.
Or I'll let you use my
82-inch flex.
Yeah, I was gonna say the freeze dryer. My wife will let you borrow it. No.
That's right.
But you share goods and service like that. That is how you get around that.
Yeah. And
the government hates that because they can't tax that. Right.
Will you let me borrow your gold bars?
What I'm saying is, when we trade, if I do work and you pay me through Venmo.
Right.
Eventually, the government doesn't right now. It's like under $600 they don't tax, but at some point they could. And they can track that and then tax that.
They will, yeah.
But if we just share services, it's like the government hates it because they can't touch us.
Yeah, I mean they technically say you should, but it's untraceable.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
and
yeah,
that's
and I'm not.
and
by the way, Jesus did say, "Render to Caesar what is Caesar." So I think we should pay tax. I'm not advocating that you shouldn't pay taxes. What I am saying is, if there's a future in which you literally cannot buy and sell because you haven't taken some mark of the.
It's sort of like money becomes a thing that is almost off the table because buying and selling isn't an option.
Right.
Bartering is Yep.
That the only way to move forward is by. I mean, networking is kind of like the baby version of what would grow into something which is a lot more robust, which is just what we call community, which is, there's this novel I read. It was talking about what would look like if the economy collapsed, completely collapsed. It was called The Mandibles.
Right.
And they actually teased out this idea, and I thought it was really that kind of goes right into this, which is it's not people who have these bomb shelters. You see right now, you see on the news, CNBC, they'll take a decommissioned silo, it used to hold a nuclear weapon, and the rich buy it and they turn it into luxury condos for if the big one comes, they can go underground.
Right.
And this author and this teased out in this novel is that they're all going to die.
Right.
And the characters in this book go and they killed each other. They actually killed each other.
Right.
That the people that survive are people who, they had a community of like 300-400 people, that protect their wealth. Because anyone who's going solo, like even it doesn't matter if you have like a gated community.
Right.
Gated community isn't going to do jack when when people are hungry.
Yeah.
But if you have a community to guard, 300 people to guard the gates, and you can.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great principle in general, that you want to be as hard to kill as possible, and it's very easy to kill one person.
Well, yeah, it's alone. Yeah, it goes. Yeah, and that's. Oh, did you ever watch the Walking Dead?
No.
My wife, she was kind of into. We watched it for a few seasons. We got bored and stopped watching it. But it's so dumb because it's like, this tribe goes against it. It just becomes this. They have to create conflict when there's,
Yeah.
It's like you would get a robust enough community and you would just be fine.
Yeah.
It would be rough, but you'd be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, although once you take it's like there's a lot of curses that come with an empirical system, like what we have, where you really have a world power as an empire, But so there's a lot of downsides to it, but one of the upsides is a relative unified peace. And once an empire is broken, you then go down to like nations, and then it's basically sort of like tribes, factions, right?
Yeah. And
the tribes and factions end up having a lot more. There's a book, I'm totally spacing on the name of it, but tribes and factions have a lot of bloodshed. But you also have there's a lot of really cool things that end up. But usually you end up having that until one tribe gets big enough, and then it kind of becomes a state, and then a nation, and then an empire, or it becomes a state, and then a nation absorbs it, and then an empire absorbs that, and it's like very interesting, the rise and fall of nations.
Mm.
But you look at like what happens in like Sudan and places where you may have had like a colonial, like an empire come in and take it over.
Yeah.
And then they get removed from the situation, and it's just warring factions. It's just civil war.
Yeah, it's just whatever mayhem was left over.
Yeah.
Yeah, just war torn.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, but yeah, you're right. Community though, community is how you win.
I noticed. It seems like first generation immigrants, they get this better than those of us who are not, because like when you come to America and you're just fresh off the boat, they say, like first of all, you don't have your dignity. You're just like, I want to survive.
Right.
And so it's just like, I don't, so many millennials who are born here, they get caught up in the like, I don't know if that fulfills me, or if it's just like, I don't know, I want to look bad. And for them, it was just like, well, you see a lot of these immigrants are like, well, I just want to give a good life for my kids.
Yeah.
But they just have this hunger, but one thing that they have is tribalism.
Yes.
Like they're just you go and find the tribe and the immigrants that came before you and clump together and.
Yep. Yeah, it's a powerful thing.
Yeah.
And something that I think Christians, like, you think about like Mormons do that really well. They kind of band together as their tribes, economically and socially and everything. Christians can take some notes from that. Jewish communities do that really well as well.
Yeah. And
Muslims, Islamic people do it very well. Christians can take some cues, not that you should be completely isolated, but that there is a healthy level of insulation from risk and stuff that communities can add.
Yeah, I wonder about that too. Because where we've come from, where it was Pedo versus Credo Baptists, and like I feel like 20 years ago it'd be like, there should be two separate churches.
Yeah.
Like what? Why are you?
Yeah.
Why are you even fellowshipping? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But it seems as though the petty things are becoming obvious that are petty. Of saying that shouldn't be something that we divide fellowship over.
Yeah.
Like most certainly there are things that we do divide fellowship over, like the inerrancy of Scripture and the, but it's
Trinity. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like that's why we don't have fellowship with Mormons, and we don't have fellowship with Muslims.
Yeah.
We disagree, and
Yeah.
But it seems as the world is getting darker, and especially I think obviously us in Portland, where we're sort of closer to the front line than someone that churches are in Texas are. Although I don't think that they're as far behind as they think they are.
Yeah.
I think I wonder, like, the people who are moving to Idaho right now and the people who are moving to Texas, like, they're not that. My opinion, I could be wrong, but it seems like they're not really.
Yeah.
Those guys are behind, but there's quite a bit of.
Well, if you go there and you don't, and you do what they've always done, which is just give up the culture. If you do what Christians have done for the last 50 years and just give up culture, then you get, like, why would you put the same thing in and expect a different result? That's insanity.
Yeah.
But if you actually engage the culture, as the post-millennial in the room, you actually can see cultures change and reformed and turn to Christ in a sense, where God actually chooses to redeem a city or a town or a state, but it just won't happen if you've got a bunch of passive Christians.
Yeah, well, but I also think, and that I am responding to a Facebook post that you made. That was like a month ago, but I don't think that the Christians in China, for instance, are like pathetic, and that's the reason. Like, they deserve the country that they get. Like, it's not that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
so you made the comment, and I'm, I could have. But you're like, you deserve the country you get, basically. If good people don't fight back, then you get what you. There may have been some of that maybe 300 years ago, but maybe not. Like, maybe they were more tyrannical, and they just,
Yeah, well, with America it's different because we started with so much freedom, and so everything we've lost, it's been given up. We've just,
but that's true of the Garden of Eden. Like,
that's right.
That's true.
Yeah.
You could go.
Yeah. So I wouldn't like to take China. I want to hear more on that, but just as a quick answer, to take China, like, I wouldn't say China now is a reflection that the church is failing. I would say, and therefore, like, you get what you deserve, church. You suck. I think that in our lifetime we're going to see China be Christian. I think it will be completely redeemed, or at least become like a Christian nation. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think you'll see communism fall in China, like Russia, and I think you'll see Christianity flourish and explode. But that's beside the point. I would say, though, it is it's part of how God judges nations. Wickedness in nations brings tyrannical leaders. That's what you see all through the nation of Israel. And you see the opposite. When people take responsibility for their actions, when they walk in God's ways, then God brings righteous, good rulers that sort of, it's almost like a reflection. The rulers become like this. They're like a mirror into the people,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know China's history enough to, like, say that. But in America, I would definitely say, like, Joe Biden is a grace. We'd probably deserve Stalin or Hitler.
Well, I think that, like, America was what it was, and it was a.
Yeah.
I don't think. First of all, I don't think that it was as good of a good as we think it was.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is it's made us soft. It's made everyone soft,
Yes.
right? I mean, like,
Yes.
it's kind of funny because you look at what 2020, it's like all these governors are like, crap, I have a lot of power. You know, it's like, what? Why didn't I do anything?
Why didn't anyone tell me?
Why did I flex this muscle before? Right?
Yeah, right.
That's what they did. They're like, oh, I can do this and I can do this, and no one's. We could just say science, and they just like shut up.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's sort of like
You just send an email to the CDC and ask them to post something, and then you can say whatever you want.
right, and it's like and like you're seeing right now is like I even seen this on the secular side. Secular people say like, dude, the pandemic's over. Like everyone who's gotten vaccinated has gotten vaccinated. We've gotten here like give it up. It's over. Like, but they're not wanting to let go.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they will. I
Yeah.
don't know if they will. That's the scary part. But
I always thought when Biden came into office, there was I wanted Trump to win. I voted for Trump, but you can edit that out now. But I had in the back of my mind, but if Biden wins, at least everything will go back to normal.
yeah. Well, that was the premise because he premised as being a moderate.
Yeah.
And he's acting like an extremist and not being the moderate. Trying to bring unity
And it should tell you, because they could have taken that win, right? The Democrats could have taken that win and just said, see, we did it. Biden's in office. We did it. COVID's gone.
But you're making my point for me, which is I don't think that America is it's just a nation. Like it's not. I mean, it's a lot of. I know a lot.
Yeah,
of,
I'm with you. I agree.
Yeah, it's just a nation, and because we've had it so good.
Yeah.
We're soft, and
yeah.
I don't think that we have any advantage over China or even Germany. So here's a great example.
Except maybe the gospel. Just take it from that because the gospel never went to China. Like until it came all the way to America, basically. Right?
But you look at how much nominal Christianity is.
Yeah,
the health, wealth,
that's right. That's right.
And like the true church is a small percentage of America. I just mean the people who are like not being nominal, who are not,
we've all gone woke and soft. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I agree. But the foundations of it are something that China has never had in its whole history.
Yeah.
It's never had any, it didn't have Christian forefathers. It didn't even have a Christian forefather.
Well, I don't know if that matters because you look at how Europe is so secular.
That's right. Yeah.
And I use the analogy of being inoculated. Like it was the birthplace of Christianity, for crying out loud. The gospel went forth.
Yes.
And it didn't seem to matter, and they are way more secular than we are.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're going through the same stage that we're going through.
Yeah.
Which is they've been inoculated to the gospel, that they've been inoculated to Christianity. It's just like, just like so many people who've been de-churched,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's like, I know, they think I know that.
Yeah. But it is important, I think, in the scope of God's plan for the world. You're right that it doesn't matter that whether Europe had Christian foundations or not, but Europe being Christian has changed the whole world, because Luther came out of Europe and Zwingli and Calvin.
There's a couple things that I want to make sure don't get lost.
Yeah.
One, and again, I'm looking through this in my worldview, so you may not see looking at the same data, you might interpret things differently.
Right.
But one thing that scares me about our culture today is it seems the similarities between what we're going through now and the French Revolution are eerie.
Yes, that's right.
This sort of citizen vigilante.
Yes.
Ruled by mob.
Yeah, and the Russian Revolution.
It's like where Einstein said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme.
Yes.
And it's like, wow, we are really close to that. And the other analogy I think of, and this is what we're talking about inflation, because one of the reasons that drove Germany towards Hitler, because Hitler was elected, people don't realize he was elected, was hyperinflation. You had to go to the wheelbarrow full of cash, the Reichmark. I think it was the Reichmark. Full of cash to go get a gallon of milk. And people would, if you left the wheelbarrow there, they would dump the cash out onto the ground and take the wheelbarrow because it was more valuable.
That's right.
And it was the fear of the hungry bellies. It was the fear of wanting stability that drove Hitler. And then like Jordan Peterson does it. He's like, don't assume that you in the same scenario where you don't know where your next meal is coming from,
right.
you don't know how you're going to get fed, you don't know how you're going to feed your kids,
right.
aren't going to elect the same tyrant.
That's right. Yeah.
It's fool to think that you would be any different.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is you take the French Revolution and how dark, and it was dark.
Yes.
I mean, just like dark.
Yeah.
And then you take, obviously being complicit in the rise of Hitler, like that's dark.
Yes.
And that was not that long ago.
Yeah.
Like, and I think what the hubris is that we've learned our lesson, that we won't see those things repeated here.
Right.
And first of all, I think you would agree with this, that can happen here, and that doesn't mean that postmillennial isn't true, although it's not true.
That's right.
but it also means like the heart is desperately wicked.
Yes.
And it's amazing what can happen when you let evil just go unchecked.
Yeah. And that, just to tie that back to what we were talking about before, I think is part of why I would say Joe Biden is a grace to us. We really deserve Adolf Hitler, because in a lot of ways, we're acting like the Germans prior to Hitler. We're acting like the Russians prior to Stalin. Like it's all a repeat. It's all sexual. I get to do whatever I want sexually. And you have all the hyperinflation happening, and then it's like, and who's gonna fix it?
Yeah.
The government. And so it's like, yeah, Joe Biden is really bad, and but yeah, it's like we're foolish to think that we've set everything up. We've been killing millions of babies, right?
Yeah.
Like yeah, we put Hitler to shame.
Well, I don't think it's fair to do that. But we most certainly give him a run for his money, for sure.
And we do it very nicely, with a smile on our face. It's very clean.
Yeah.
Right? There's no world war. Yeah. Right? We've killed how many? 50 million
Which, again,
babies
I don't know. And I know this. I'm just speaking through. I don't know how you look at the world getting so dark and be post-millennial.
Yeah.
And I had this thought. I read in there's this great book. Good to Great.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of it?
I have it on
It's an
myself.
Entrepreneur.
I haven't read it, but I have it on myself.
It's a great book, and he tells this great story, which I think is applicable to people who are pre-trib, and also people who are post-millennial, which is I think it was in Vietnam. In Vietnam, there were a bunch of POWs. So they got captured in the war, and they were interviewing the survivors, or the author of this book was interviewing the survivors. He said, "Who is the ones that survived?" And he's like, "Well, I can tell you the ones who didn't survive." And they were in POW camp for 5 years, and they were rough conditions.
Yeah.
He said, "Well, the ones who didn't survive are the ones who, when they were first captured, they're like, we're gonna be home by Christmas."
Right.
And then Christmas would come, and they weren't saved, or they weren't rescued.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we're gonna be home by New Year's. New Year's would come. We're gonna be home by the summer or the spring. And they said that they didn't die. They died of a broken heart.
Right.
They died of losing hope. Right. Or I would say, they put their hope in the wrong thing.
That's right.
And I listened to, talking about trying to listen to people on the other side. So I listen to Athey Creek. They have these prophecy updates once a month, and I'll listen to it just because I think it's good to hear people you disagree with. But when they talk about things getting really dark, and there should be like a soberness, and he's like giddy. Because it's like, I'm not doom and gloom, I'm boom and zoom. And it's like, okay, but if you're wrong, and this is my point, if you're wrong,
Yeah.
if you're wrong and I'm speaking of, if you're wrong that the church is not raptured like when you say it will be before the Great Tribulation, the last 7 years or whatever.
Right.
And I'm not obviously, but like you do great harm because you're hyping up and and then you're not preparing them in a different way that like John MacArthur. I think is he pre-trib? I can't remember if he's pre-trib or not. I think he's
pretty classic rapture. I think.
Okay. Well, anyway, what I'm saying is it doesn't prepare you. Like and this is kind of where I kind of get my, my eschatology from, like, inferred from the Acts, because they suffered, and they had to be ready to suffer.
Yeah. Amen.
And what I'm saying is, like, but if you put your hope in something that, and what I would say to the pre-tribbers, if you put your hope in that, it'll devastate you if you're wrong. Like, what if there's no rapture? I think that the irony is, I think that all those people who are pre-tribbers, like, they're going to go through the tribulation, and then Jesus will come back, and they're like, oh, there's the rapture. Like, well, no, there wasn't. You don't. This is the.
It was backwards.
It's back. You don't realize that you actually went through all the. It's not. So they just become tribulation deniers. It's not. This is not the tribulation. This is not bad. As they're chopping heads off.
That's right. Yeah.
And inserting computer chips. It's not that bad. But I would say the same thing about people who are, and I've said this before, like, Doug Wilson, who lives in a blue state.
Yeah.
In a very much somewhat, and I know the schools have been incredibly, the liberal schools have been incredibly on him.
Yeah, the city.
Yeah, but he still lives in a pretty conservative, and I wonder if it's like survivor bias of, like, would you, and that's someone pointed out that I don't think you find very many post-millennials in China or Russia, or like in the fallen, like Romania, where there's a fallen communism, and it's still really dark there.
Yeah.
Or Africa. Like, the only places that you find post-millennialism is it's like where it's a survivor bias, where you're...
Yeah, but you look at a lot of the reformers held to post-millennial, at least like a post-millennial or sort of an amillennial view. But it was definitely a very hopeful, optimistic view that Christ's word would actually go forth and be effective in the world. And I mean, Luther and Calvin and Zwingli, they all lived in very tumultuous times politically.
Yeah.
But no, I get it. I totally get it. And my just one comment for the record on, things are so dark and therefore, postmillennialism is looking like a worse and worse option, right?
Yeah.
And I really and we've talked about this a lot, but I'm like, that is the story of every Christian, that, like, that's what God does. He takes dead, dark people, and then he redeems them. His Spirit comes to them. He brings them from death to life, and then he redeems their life from darkness to light. And I really believe that as God does that through individuals, that those individuals have families, and they have businesses, and they're in politics, and that it actually changes cultures long term. Just like it does, it's like if you saw my life in high school, you would have been a premillennialist, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like, as long as you're being faithful in building, I think that there's not like a...
You know what? I almost forgot one thing.
Yeah.
So at the end of a lot of podcasts, they say, what do you want to plug? So Gabe, you own Pest Patrol.
Yeah.
Your website is?
PestPatrolPDX.com.
And your phone number is?
503-985-6523. So
if you want to, where's the camera? If you want to murder your rodents that are invading your house,
or your ants
in cold blood,
you
can also murder your ants. Or you murder your ants, then contact Gabe. Or if you're looking to buy or sell property, then I'm your man.
That's right. And where do they find you?
Anderson37.com for more information.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
Well done. Thanks for having me.
That's not quite the angry Gabe that I see on Facebook.
Yeah, we'll have to save that for another episode.
You just have to say that for social media.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Cool.